You probably know that Russia and the USA are separated by only the ridiculous distance of 82 kilometers in the so-called Bering Strait that separates the two largest blocks of landmass that exist on the planet. Although in reality the distance between the two countries is only 3 kilometers, because right in the center of the strait there are two islands, each belonging to a country. On very rare occasions during the winter, the ocean water freezes, forming an ice bridge that literally allows you to walk from one country to the other one, in a short half-an-hour walk. However, in this video, we're not going to talk about short walks on the ice, but about how for decades these two countries have been planning the construction of a gigantic bridge that unites not the islands, but the continental masses of Asia and North America, that would allow you to go from London to Patagonia by car. A project that, thanks to climatic improvements in the area because of the global warming, is closer than ever to becoming a reality. I have just said that this bridge will unite the continental mass of Russia or Asia with that of the United States of America. If I hadn't made the clarification about the islands, we could assume that these islands also belong to their respective continents, and that the bridge is actually made between them, which would be false. The thing is that it's very difficult to determine what is a continent and what is not, what is an island and what ceases to be one, and what belongs to each thing, and we need to clarify it before continuing with one of my favorite examples. Incredible reliefs. This is the Volcan Point, a very cute and particular island because it is located in a lake inside the crater of a volcano, which in turn is in an island of an even larger lake located in Luzon, another island, where the capital of the Philippines, Manila, is. Unfortunately, as if the coronavirus wasn't enough, at the beginning of 2020, a volcano eruption ate the island's lake, destroying also the Volcan Point. It's curious because Google Maps already updated the topography, but the satellites have not yet taken the pictures. Fortunately, that same year, a person who has a hobby looks for this type of extreme natural coincidences found a substitute for Volcan Point in Canada, a series of islets in a lake located on an island, and well, you know how it goes. In any case, it has the same number of islands within islands as the Volcan Point, which is currently the world record. Although, most likely there are many more islands of this type scattered around the planet, or there might even be a fourth degree of islandception, waiting for someone curious enough to find it on Google Earth. Who knows, that someone could be you. But for how long could we keep going? Aren't continents just giant islands? Where are the limits of small and big, and how big does a rock that sticks out of the sea have to be considered an island? And why is this considered an island, and this one not? Let me explain. Greenland is much larger than Australia, and yet Australia is considered a continent, under the name of Oceania, while Greenland is considered a simple island. Although, are you sure about that? On the website, the true size of that you have in the description, you can compare the sizes of different regions of the planet. It is curious to see how big Mexico is if we take it to Europe, or how small Spain is if we take it lower to the tropics. This happens because it is impossible to project a sphere that is the Earth on a plane without having deformations, that, for pragmatism, were allowed in the areas closest to the poles, because fewer people live there, so it matters less if they are deformed. At least for now. For this reason, if we drag Greenland towards Australia, we see how Australia is really much bigger than the polar island. And suddenly, everything makes sense. In fact, according to international conventions, Greenland is the largest island that exists on Earth. Above, it is followed by continents, for pure convenience, without any obvious scientific reason that allows drawing a line between what is a continent and what is an island. And below, it is followed by New Guinea and Borneo, while the smallest island is... well, that's complicated. There is the Just Room Enough Island. Look how small it is, which is the smallest inhabited island that exists on the world, located in the state of New York. And regarding the true smallest island on the planet, it changes every single second that passes. Because the coasts of the whole world are full of small rocks that protrude from the water a little bit, but only a few millimeters, so with increase of the sea level, each moment that passes there is a new flooded island and a new candidate. So as you can see, the definitions of continent and island are very ambiguous, subjective, and I would even dare to say that they are synonymous, at least from certain perspectives. Science hasn't come to an agreement, but what happens if we see it strictly through the geological lenses? For this, we're gonna use the combination of two maps. The first one, of the famous limits of tectonic plates, the different blocks of rock that make up the Earth's crust. And the second one that shows the topography of the entire planet, with oceans included. This is what I mean, a map of global height, or in other words, a relief map as if there was no water on the planet. What is very clearly distinguished is the difference between the so-called continental crust and the oceanic crust, the two great types of rock on a very large scale and features of which the most superficial layer of the planet can be made of. As you can see, the continents coincide with the highest area, that are those of the continental crust, while the oceans coincide with the lowest ones, the oceanic crust. They can clearly be distinguished with height, and it turns out that, generalizing, they also have quite different chemical compositions. The problem lies in the light blue color, continental crust, but it is just below sea level. It is for this reason that the world's beaches do not have a direct cliff to abyssal depths, but rather they go down slowly until well in the sea they reach the Great Abyss, the true limit of the continental platform. And what happens is that depending on the height of the sea level, part of this blue zone can emerge and be considered part of the continent, and vice versa. One of the areas where this phenomenon has occurred the most in the recent history of the planet is precisely in the Bering Bridge, or, in other words, the zone of the continental crust submerged under the Bering Strait. Until 11,000 years ago, this was their state, with America and Asia completely united, forming a supercontinent. In fact, it was this gigantic natural bridge that allowed humans to cross the strait and populate the Americas. If it hadn't existed, it is possible that humans would not have reached the continent until the European conquest. So, although we could consider the continental crust as the true limit between continents, it happens that practically all the continents of the planet are united by these blue zones that sometimes emerge and are part of the mainland. However, there are some small fissures that are not visible on this scale, but that can help us to draw the limits. And here is where the second map, with the borders of the tectonic plates, comes in. The truth is that it matches very well. Some small new continents appear, but in general, all the limits of traditional continents are maintained and fit both with the continental crust as with the plate boundaries, except for one, and just one, precisely the one we're interested in. Through the Bering Strait, no plate boundaries go through. Eastern Eurasia actually belongs to the North American plate. However, it is precisely this apparently disappointing context what allows the construction of the Great Bridge to be viable. If there were a plate boundary in the strait, the terrain would be very unstable and dangerous. And if it was too deep, it would actually be too expensive to work on. So, sticking to the traditional definition that a continent is understood as a large mass of emerged land where you can drive continuously using a land vehicle, let's see how these countries intend to build the bridge that will revive the supercontinent that once allowed humans to reach America. The islands called Diomedes are the key point. Between them, there's not only the border, but also lies what is called the international date line. That marks the point where the day begins. In the few minutes that it takes to go from one island to the other, you can go back or forward 24 hours in international time. In addition, the islands would serve as a perfect support point for the bridges. Because of all of this, it would be in the Diomedes where the administrative limit would be, all the maintenance and administration. And surprisingly, the area would not be too hostile for the bridge or its construction, since the maximum depth in the strait is only 55 meters, and the tides and currents in the area are very calm. The only problem being the cold and darkness during the months of winter. The idea is to build a bridge that goes from the American coast to the smallest island, the inhabited American one. Then another tiny bridge that joins it with a Russian one, which is uninhabited, that would be crossed through a tunnel since it's too tall, and finish with a section from the Russian island to the mainland. 80 kilometers of bridge in total, 40 kilometers each one. The Dongai Bridge, the largest in the world that crosses sea, measures 32 kilometers. So, technologically speaking, we are not that far. And the total estimated price of the project, that is, the construction of the bridge that would allow the passage of cars, trains and oil pipelines, would be $100 billion, 3 times the Eurotunnel, and 10 times the James Webb Telescope from NASA. It's a lot of money, yes, but nothing unreasonable if we take into account that this bridge would create the largest commercial route in history. Right? This specifically is what is unclear. The Russians are by far the ones that have bet the most on the idea, having started several projects prior to the construction of the bridge itself, that basically consist of bringing human infrastructure to the Russian coast, that is actually completely uninhabited for hundreds of square kilometers. Lately, China has been involved in the project, but with some suspicion. The problem is that it is cheaper and more efficient to transport goods from California and Panama to China and Russia directly with ships. In addition, the terrible and in many cases non-existent infrastructure on both sides difficults even more the viability of the plan. But possibly, in the coming years, the paradigm will change, since the scarcity of fossil fuels will make this type of transportation with gigantic ships increasingly unfeasible, making road transportation with electric trucks more profitable. In addition, global warming will make the northernmost regions of the planet more hospitable, giving a strong push to the development of infrastructure in the area. Therefore, it is quite probable that in the coming decades, we will witness the construction of this colossal and spectacular engineering work that, in a certain way, will revive from the ashes the archaic continent of Eurasia America, which in the past already allowed humanity to thrive throughout the whole planet. Thank you very much for watching the video, and goodbye.